All right, welcome to your own personal deep dive. This time we're going deep on knowledge and decisions.
Oh, this is the good one.
Yeah, by economist Thomas Sowell.
Okay.
Now, before we jump in, this book, it's not just for econ nerds.
Yeah.
It's really about how we make decisions. Like
Yeah.
any decision.
Right.
In law, politics, like even just daily life.
Yeah, so he's got this way of connecting things you'd never think of,
Oh, yeah.
showing how, like, decisions, they have these ripple effects, you know? It makes you think, like, who's really making the calls here? Are we as in control as we think we are?
It's a good question.
Yeah.
One of the first things Sowell tackles is this idea of income distribution.
Okay.
And right away, he's like, hold on. Most income, it's not distributed at all. It's
Yeah.
earned.
Right.
So, like, you provide a service,
Yeah.
you get paid,
Mm-hmm.
your property generates income,
Yeah.
that's yours.
Right.
It's like a simple point, but it kind of blows open these huge questions.
Well, yeah, I mean, if income's mostly earned,
Yeah.
then how does that change our ideas of, like, social justice?
Exactly.
What does fairness even mean in that kind of context?
It gets even more intense when he starts talking about the cost of bad decisions.
Oh,
He uses the example of Pearl Harbor.
right.
Like, misjudging the intelligence, it didn't just cost those officials their salaries.
Right.
It costs lives.
Yeah, and that's what Sowell does. He makes you see the real cost of a decision. It's not just like the immediate money.
Yeah.
It's the ripple effect,
Right.
the unintended consequences,
Yeah.
sometimes years down the line.
It makes you think twice about, like, every little choice, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
And then he gets into how organizations work,
Okay.
comparing, like, strict by-the-book places
Yeah.
versus those with more informal arrangements.
Yeah, I've worked in both.
Me too. And honestly, sometimes you need that flexibility,
Yeah,
but other times those clear rules, they're a lifesaver.
right. And so Wells not saying one is better than the other. He's saying it depends on the context.
Yeah.
Like formal structures,
Mm-hmm.
they give you stability, maybe even security.
Yeah.
Informal networks,
Mm-hmm.
they can, like, bend, adapt when things change fast.
It's true.
So it's like, think about where you work,
Yeah.
what system's in place.
Mm-hmm.
Does it actually help you get things done? Or does it, hinder?
I'm already looking at my job differently. And then well, he dives into this concept he calls the life cycle of institutions.
Okay.
So he argues, like, as institutions age,
Uh-huh.
like, let's say a regulatory agency,
Right.
the people running them change.
Yeah.
The priorities change. Sometimes they end up doing the opposite
Yeah.
of what they were originally supposed to do.
It's true. Like, think about it.
Mm-hmm.
If you join an organization
Yeah.
and everyone there has been there for decades,
Yeah.
are you going to rock the boat? Or are you going to start thinking like them?
I know. I'd probably just go with the flow.
Right. And this applies to everything.
Yeah.
Charities, political parties.
Mm-hmm.
It makes you wonder, are they really independent?
Yeah.
Or are they just shaped by the people inside?
It makes you think about the institutions you trust, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
Then there's the rent control debate.
Oh, yeah.
That always gets people going.
It's a hot topic.
Sowell says it's not just about the money or who gets housing. It's
Yeah.
about knowledge itself getting distorted.
Have you ever been in a situation
Mhm.
where, like, you were willing to pay more for something,
Yeah.
but the price was kept artificially low?
Yeah. I could see that.
That's what Sowell says happens with rent control.
Okay.
Like, renters might want to signal,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I'd pay more for a better building,
Right.
but they can't.
Yeah.
And landlords aren't getting the information.
Yeah.
They need to make the best decisions.
It's like playing a game,
Mm-hmm.
but the scoreboard's broken.
Yeah,
How can anyone make the right call
right.
if the information's messed up?
Ex-
And then Sowell brings up this fascinating example from history,
Oh, yeah.
the jitneys.
Okay.
So jitneys were these independent, owner-operated, like, buses or taxis that popped up in the early 1900s.
Like Goober.
Yeah, but, like, a century ago,
Right.
they were flexible, responsive to
Yeah.
what people actually needed, especially during rush hour.
Interesting.
Sounds great. Right?
Well-
So why don't we have jitneys now?
Yeah, what happened?
That's exactly what Sowell wants us to think about.
Okay.
How do powerful interests,
Alright.
maybe working with regulations,
Yeah.
squash potentially better solutions? Like,
Right.
the jitney is a case study
Wow.
in how competition
Yeah.
and innovation get stifled.
It's true.
So even if something works well, it might not survive if it threatens the status quo.
Right.
It makes you wonder what brilliant ideas are getting buried right now, doesn't it?
It really does.
And so Wells' point isn't to praise the jitney specifically. It's to challenge us to ask, like, are the systems we have
Truly the best?
Yeah.
Or are they just the ones that happen to win out?
The good question.
This is already mind-blowing, and we're just getting started with Sowell's deep dive.
Oh, there's so much more.
Yeah.
And what I think you'll find most fascinating is how he connects all these seemingly separate ideas to reveal these like fundamental truths about how the world actually works.
I can't wait.
Yeah, it's good stuff. And one of those truths is this idea of like objective needs.
Okay.
It's a lot more slippery than we think. So Lau uses the example of airport landing fees to kind of illustrate this.
Airport landing fees, I'm intrigued.
Yeah.
But how does that connect to, like, needs?
So think about it.
Okay.
If you keep those fees artificially low, like at some government-run airports, it creates this illusion that we need way more flights than we actually do.
Okay.
And you end up with all these flights, half-empty planes.
Because the price doesn't reflect the real cost.
So it's like this false demand because the price signal is all messed up.
Right.
Does that apply to other things too? Like healthcare or education?
Ooh.
If the price isn't reflecting the real cost,
Yeah.
does that like warp our perception?
Now you're getting into some deep waters.
Yeah.
And that's what Sowell's all about, right? He's not giving easy answers.
Right.
He's prompting us to question,
Yeah.
like, the underlying assumptions of the whole system.
It's making me realize like how often we rely on experts' statistics to tell us what's going on.
Right.
But Sowell talks about the limits of articulation.
Correct.
So basically, no matter how well we explain something, whether it's words or numbers, we're always losing some of the picture.
It's like trying to describe a symphony.
Okay.
Just by looking at the sheet music.
Right.
You're missing the performance, the emotion, the life of it. And this is huge when it comes to decisions.
Yeah.
Especially like social policy.
Right.
Can a model, a statistic, ever really capture the messy reality of human choice?
Right.
What gets left out? And like, what's the cost of that?
Wow, that's a sobering thought.
Yeah.
It makes you realize how much we simplify things just to, make them manageable.
Right.
Speaking of things that are hard to grasp.
Yeah.
So Adol really goes there when he talks about constitutional rights.
Okay.
He says even those are essentially like options backed up by force.
Right.
And their real value depends on how much it costs to actually enforce them.
He's pointing out this uncomfortable truth, a right without the power to defend it. It's just words on paper.
Yeah.
Think about it. What happens when the cost of vindicating a right becomes too high?
Yeah.
Does that mean some rights are more real than others?
That's a tough one.
It is.
This connects to what you were saying earlier about the gap between the decision makers and those who bear the consequences.
Exactly.
If my rights depend on someone else being willing to enforce them, that's a lot of power.
A lot of power in their hands.
Yeah.
Exactly. And Sowell argues that this disconnect, it's growing.
Okay.
As government gets bigger, more involved in our lives, the power to decide, it gets further and further away from the average person.
It's like that rent control example again. They might have good intentions, but are they the ones living with the broken buildings, the shortages?
Exactly.
So Wells making me see how good intentions, they aren't enough.
No, they're not.
And then he takes this even further, saying the rise of intellectuals, especially in the social sciences, has actually contributed to the erosion of freedom.
Okay.
Wait, hold on. How can the pursuit of knowledge of social justice lead to less freedom?
That's the challenge, right?
It seems like a contradiction.
It does.
Yeah.
But he's saying intellectuals, in their quest to fix society, often push for policies that expand government control.
Right.
Limiting what individuals can choose.
It's like a we know better mentality.
The we know better mentality.
Yeah.
And Sowell says that's dangerous.
So even well-meaning efforts to improve things can backfire, especially if they ignore those unintended consequences.
Right.
I'm starting to see how this all ties together. Knowledge, power, who gets to decide.
You got it.
Yeah.
That's the heart of it.
It is.
He's challenging us to think critically.
Yeah.
About how knowledge is used, how decisions are made,
right,
and how power is exercised in society.
And this leads to this really interesting historical case study.
Okay, what's that?
The declining national IQ panic of the early 20th century.
Right.
So unpacks how, like, flawed data and prejudice were used to justify some pretty terrible policies.
It's a cautionary tale.
Yeah.
About jumping to conclusions.
I've heard a bit about this.
Yeah.
But tell me more.
Okay, so back then, there was this huge wave of immigration.
Right.
And some people, mostly intellectuals, policymakers, they kind of freaked out.
Oh, yeah.
Convinced these immigrants, especially from Southern and Eastern Europe, were dragging down the nation's intelligence.
So, like, blaming newcomers for societal problems.
Basically.
That sounds sadly familiar.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And they were using these IQ tests. But as Sowell points out, the tests were culturally biased.
Okay.
Didn't account for language barriers.
Right.
All sorts of problems.
Yeah.
They weren't really measuring intelligence. They were measuring how Americanized you already were.
Yeah. So bad data leading to bad decisions.
Yep.
Fueled by prejudice.
Exactly.
It's a reminder to always question the source.
Always question the source, because what seems like a fact could be anything but.
And what's even more fascinating is that later on, those same immigrant groups, once they settled, learned English, guess what?
What?
Their IQ scores caught up.
Oh, wow.
Even surpassed native-born Americans in some cases.
Interesting.
Totally debunks that whole fixed intelligence idea.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It really shows how nurture and environment can trump whatever you think is, like, natural.
Makes you wonder how many other, like, social panics are based on similarly flawed assumptions.
Right. And so Will's point isn't just to critique the past.
Yeah.
It's to make us more critical thinkers now.
Yeah.
Don't take things at face value.
Right.
Especially when it comes to these big sweeping claims about entire groups of people. Look at the evidence.
Yeah.
Consider the context. Be willing to change your mind.
This makes me think about how we talk about, like, individualized justice.
Okay.
But how can that even be possible if you're constantly generalizing about people?
Right.
Does Sowell address this?
He absolutely does.
Okay.
He challenges the very idea that courts can, like, perfectly assess each individual and tailor the punishment accordingly.
Right.
He uses the criminal justice system as a prime example, pointing out the challenges of gathering accurate information in a setting where people have every incentive to lie or hide the truth.
So even with the best intentions, trying to individualize justice, it might not be realistic.
It might not be.
There are always going to be limitations to what we can know about a person.
It's true, especially in a legal context.
Yeah.
This raises all these tough questions, right? What are the trade-offs between individualized justice and consistent application of the law?
It's a balance.
It is.
Yeah.
Is it even possible
Right.
to be truly fair?
Right.
Are we always working with incomplete information?
Yeah, probably.
So, Well doesn't give easy answers.
Right.
But he makes sure you're asking the right questions.
Yeah. This is heavy stuff.
It is.
But I'm starting to see how it all connects. Knowledge, decisions, power.
Right.
It all comes down to who controls the narrative, who gets to define the problem, whose interests are being served.
You're getting it. You're getting to the heart of Sowell's argument.
Yeah, this is...
He's challenging us to think critically about how knowledge is used, how decisions are made, how power is exercised in society.
This is making me think a lot about, like, the institutions that shape our lives.
Yeah.
Everything from the government to schools to the media. Does Sowell have anything to say?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
About the role of institutions in all of this.
Yeah.
What he has to say, it's both insightful and provocative.
Oh, I like that.
He argues that institutions, they're essential.
Okay.
But they can also be incredibly dangerous if they're not carefully designed and constantly scrutinized.
So it's not enough to just have, like, good people in charge?
You know, institutions themselves need to be structured in a way that encourages good decision-making and prevents the abuse of power.
This reminds me of what you were saying earlier about the rise of intellectuals and their unintended contribution to the erosion of freedom.
Exactly.
It seems like Sowell's suggesting that institutions, even those created with noble intentions, can become tools for controlling people rather than empowering them.
You're catching on.
Yeah.
He's deeply skeptical of what he calls the vision of the anointed.
Okay.
This idea that a select few have the wisdom and authority to dictate how the rest of us should live.
Yeah, it's like the we know better mentality again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he argues this mindset leads to policies that restrict individual choice, concentrate power in the hands of experts and bureaucrats.
So even institutions claiming to be promoting like social justice or the common good can end up doing more harm than good.
They can.
Yeah.
If they're not grounded in respect for individual freedom.
Right.
And a recognition of the limits of human knowledge.
This reminds me of the earlier discussion about the unintended consequences of well-intentioned policies. It seems like Sowell is urging us to be more humble in our aspirations.
Oh, yes.
To recognize the limits of our knowledge. Yeah. To be wary of solutions that sound too good to be true.
You've got it.
Yeah.
You've captured the essence of Sowell's message.
Right.
He's not opposed to progress.
Right.
But he believes real progress is achieved incrementally through trial and error and a willingness to adapt to changing circumstances.
It's a powerful message.
It is.
It gives me hope that even in a world full of complex challenges, we can find ways to make better decisions, create a more just and prosperous society.
He reminds us that progress, it's not a linear process. There will be setbacks, mistakes, unintended consequences.
Right, along the way.
Along the way.
So we need to be resilient. Adaptable, willing to learn from our mistakes.
And patient.
Patient,
Recognizing that real change often takes time.
This brings us to another important theme that runs throughout Sowell's book, the role of time in decision-making.
Time,
He highlights the challenges of making decisions in a world where the consequences, they often unfold over like extended periods.
Long periods. Right.
He argues that our natural tendency to focus on the short term can lead to decisions that are harmful in the long run.
In the long run, exactly.
So we need to think beyond like the immediate gratification, the quick fix, and consider the long-term consequences.
Long-term consequences, that's key.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to things like social policy. Right. Where the impact, it can take years, even decades to fully manifest.
This makes me think about our earlier discussion about criminal justice.
Right.
And the difficulty of assessing those long-term effects of different approaches to punishment.
Exactly. You're making the connections.
Yeah.
Sowell argues that our criminal justice system, with its emphasis on due process, niggle technicalities, it often sacrifices swift and certain punishment for the sake of protecting the rights of the accused.
It's a classic trade-off.
Yeah.
Balancing the rights of the individual against the need to protect society from crime.
It is a balance.
It is. And Sowell argues that this trade-off, it's shifted too far in favor of the rights of the accused, leading to a decline in the deterrent effect of punishment and an increase in crime rates.
This is a controversial argument.
It is.
But it's one that deserves, serious consideration.
It does.
Yeah.
It seems like he's challenging us to rethink our assumptions about criminal justice.
Right.
And to consider the long-term consequences
of our current approach.
He contends that our preoccupation with procedural justice, it's come at the expense of substantive justice. That the rights of criminals have been elevated above the rights of victims and law-abiding citizens. That's a provocative claim.
It is.
It raises these fundamental questions.
Right.
About the purpose of criminal justice and that balance between individual rights and the need for social order.
And Sowell argues that this imbalance, it's not limited with the criminal justice system.
Right.
He sees it as a broader trend in modern society.
Yeah.
Where the rights of individuals, especially those perceived as marginalized or disadvantaged, are often given precedence over the needs of the community as a whole.
So it's a question of prioritizing individual rights over collective responsibilities.
Exactly.
Right.
And he contends that this shift in emphasis has weakened social bonds, eroded traditional values, and undermined institutions that provide stability and order.
That's a profound challenge.
It is.
To, like, the prevailing ethos of our time.
Right.
It seems like Sowell is urging us to reconsider the balance between individual freedom and social responsibility.
Exactly.
To recognize that a healthy society depends on both.
You're catching on.
Yeah.
Sowell argues that individual freedom, while essential, it's not an absolute right.
Right.
It has to be balanced against the needs of the community and the institutions that sustain a civilized society.
This is a powerful message.
It is.
It seems like he's advocating for a kind of social contract.
A social contract.
Yeah.
Where individuals have rights,
right,
but also responsibilities.
Responsibilities, to
the community.
This makes me think about the role of, like, culture, tradition in shaping our moral compass. It seems like Sowell's suggesting that a healthy society needs a strong moral foundation.
Yes.
A set of values that guide our choices and help us navigate
the complexities of social life.
You're right on target.
Yeah.
He argues that culture and tradition are essential for transmitting knowledge across generations and for shaping our understanding of right and wrong.
So it's not just about having the right laws or institutions.
It's about having that shared sense of value.
That shared sense of values.
The common understanding of what it means to be a good citizen, a responsible member of society.
Exactly.
And Sowell argues that this sense of shared values, it's often undermined in modern societies by the rise of individualism, the erosion of traditional institutions, and the dominance of a relativistic worldview.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
But it's also a necessary corrective to this often uncritical celebration of individual freedom and the denigration of traditional values.
It's about finding that balance.
Finding that balance,
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Sowell challenges us to think critically about the foundations of a healthy and prosperous society, to recognize that individual freedom, while essential, is not the only value that matters.
And this brings us to another important theme that runs throughout Sowell's work, the importance of understanding the trade-offs.
Trade-offs inherent in any decision.
There
are no perfect solutions. Only trade-offs. Every decision has costs and benefits. All we can do is try to weigh those costs and benefits carefully and choose the option that, maximizes the overall good.
So it's about making informed choices.
Informed choices,
Understanding the consequences. Being willing to accept that sometimes the best decision is the one that minimizes harm. Even if it doesn't achieve everything we might desire.
Exactly. And he challenges us to be wary of these utopian schemes that promise perfect solutions.
Like a world without trade-offs.
The world without trade-offs, He argues that those visions are not only unrealistic, but can actually lead to policies that are harmful, counterproductive.
This reminds me of what we were talking about earlier about the unintended consequence.
Unintended consequences, of well-intentioned policies.
It seems like he's urging us to be more humble.
More humble,
To recognize the
limits of our knowledge. And to be wary of solutions that sound too good to be true.
Exactly.
You've captured it again. He's not opposed to progress. But he believes that real progress is achieved incrementally through trial and error and a willingness to adapt to changing circumstances.
It's a powerful message. And it gives me hope that even in a world that's full of these complex challenges, we can find ways.
And you can find ways
to make better decisions. And create a more just and prosperous society.
And he reminds us that knowledge, it's not a static entity. It's a dynamic process of discovery, experimentation, adaptation.
So we need to be lifelong learners.
Lifelong learners.
Open to new ideas, willing to challenge our own assumptions.
Our own assumptions, exactly.
Yeah.
And humble.
Humble, yeah.
Recognizing that we don't have all the answers.
That's a hard one.
It is.
But it's true.
It's true.
And he emphasizes the importance of having institutions that encourage the free flow of information. Open debate.
Open debates, yeah.
A diversity of perspectives.
Diversity of perspectives. That's key.
This brings us to another important theme.
Okay.
That Sowell explores the role of competition.
Competition, yeah.
In driving innovation and progress.
Competition is essential.
Right.
Whether it's in the marketplace or in the realm of ideas.
Yeah.
For discovering better ways of doing things.
So competition's not just about, like, winning or losing.
It's about pushing ourselves.
Yeah.
Pushing each other.
To do better.
To do better, yeah.
Find creative solutions.
Right.
To constantly raise the bar.
Raise the bar, exactly.
And he argues that attempts to stifle competition, whether through government regulation or the creation of monopolies, often lead to stagnation.
Stagnation, yeah.
Inefficiency.
Inefficiency.
And a decline in quality.
A decline in quality, that's right.
This makes me think about that earlier discussion about the rise of the jitneys.
The jitneys, right? How they provided that vibrant alternative
to existing transportation systems.
Exactly.
Yeah, before being stifled by regulation.
You're making excellent connections.
It's a reminder that sometimes the best solutions come from unexpected places.
They do.
Yeah.
And that allowing for a diversity of approaches, experimentation,
can lead to breakthroughs.
Absolutely.
That wouldn't have been possible otherwise.
Sherrill challenges us to be wary of attempts to limit competition.
Right.
To pick winners and losers in the marketplace.
Yeah.
Or in the realm of ideas.
Because those interventions, they often stifle innovation.
To stifle innovation, lead to worse outcomes for everyone.
This is a powerful argument for the importance of free markets, open societies. Yeah, it really makes you think about things differently.
It does.
Sowell's book, it's not like a light read or anything.
No.
But it's just packed with these insights that really make you question, like, what you thought you knew.
That's what's so good about it.
Yeah.
He's not giving you answers.
Right.
He's giving you the right questions. He makes you think for yourself. Challenge your assumptions.
Yeah.
Recognize that the world's complex.
Speaking of complexity, he goes into this topic that's, like, always oversimplified. This idea of individual versus collective responsibility.
Right.
He says there needs to be a balance, like a social contract, where individual freedom isn't just, you know, doing whatever you want. It's about recognizing your role in a larger community.
He uses this phrase, the erosion of traditional values.
Yeah.
Which can sound kind of old-fashioned.
I know.
But think about it.
Okay.
If everyone's just out for themselves, what holds society together?
A good question.
He argues that shared values passed down through culture, tradition, those are what make a society functional, even moral.
This makes me think about how we often, like, glorify individualism, but we forget that we're all interconnected. Like, individual freedom is crucial.
It is.
But it can't exist in a vacuum.
It can't.
There's a responsibility that comes with it.
Yeah, that's the tension he's exploring. He's not saying we need to go back to some idealized past.
Right.
But he has asking us to consider what's been lost in this push for radical individualism.
Yeah.
What happens when there's no shared understanding of what's right and wrong?
Yeah.
No sense of obligation beyond yourself.
Makes you wonder if some of the problems we face are rooted in this, like, loss of a common moral compass.
Right. It's like everyone's speaking a different language.
Right.
Arguing from totally different sets of values.
And that's where Sowell's focus on knowledge becomes so important.
It is.
He's saying we can't even have a productive debate if we're not starting from a shared understanding of reality.
A shared understanding of reality.
Of basic facts.
Basic facts.
How cause and effect work.
Right. If everyone's got their own truth, how do you make decisions that actually benefit society as a whole?
It's like trying to build a house where everyone's using different blueprints. So what's the solution? How do we even get back to that shared understanding?
Right. Especially in a world where information's so fragmented.
Everyone's in their own echo chamber.
Right. So Wilthe doesn't offer, like easy answers.
Right.
But he points to institutions as playing a key role.
Okay, not just government.
Not just government. Nope.
Yeah.
Schools, families.
Right.
Even the way we structure our communities. Are they promoting critical thinking?
Yeah.
Open debate? A willingness to consider different viewpoints?
Right.
Or are they just reinforcing division and dogma?
So it's not enough to just have, access to information.
Access to information, it's about creating the right environments.
Right, where that information can be processed, debated, used to make sound judgments.
Sound judgments, yeah.
It's about cultivating a culture of intellectual humility.
Intellectual humility, exactly.
Like you were saying.
And so Will argues this is a constant struggle.
Right.
Like a vigilance that can never let up.
Yeah, he's not optimistic.
He's not optimistic in the sense of, like, thinking there's some endpoint where everything's perfect.
Yeah.
But he also is optimistic about human potential.
Okay.
He believes that if we understand these principles he lays out, we can make better choices.
Right.
Build better institutions.
Yeah.
Create a more just and flourishing world.
That's a message I think we all need to hear.
I think so, too.
It's easy to get overwhelmed by the complexity of it all.
Yeah.
Feel like our individual actions don't really matter.
But he reminds us, knowledge is power. And those choices we make, the institutions we support, they all add up to something bigger.
And he leaves us with this challenge.
Oh, yeah.
Are we going to be passive consumers of information, just letting others decide for us?
Right.
Or are we going to be active participants in the process of knowledge creation?
Knowledge creation.
And decision-making.
The future, he suggests.
Yeah.
Depends on our answer to that question.
Wow. That's a powerful way to end things.
It is.
This deep dive into knowledge and decisions, it's been a real eye-opener for me.
It's a good one.
It's challenged me to, think more critically about the world, the institutions I take for granted, and my own role in shaping a better future.
And I hope it sparks some curiosity in you, too, listener.
Yes.
Go out there, explore these ideas further.
Yeah.
Most importantly, don't be afraid to question, challenge.
Yeah.
Keep learning. That's the real legacy of Thomas Sowell's work.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Yeah.
This has been an incredible journey through Sowell's world.
It has.
Until next time, keep diving deep.